Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our, I'm Marco Davis, President and CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, CHCI. I want to welcome you to our webinar here tonight, where we're going to be learning about the White House Fellows Program, which is a really extraordinary program. We're happy that this webinar is part of a series sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb. We're really grateful for their partnership in helping to provide content that's valuable to our alumni and other emerging leaders in the Latino community to help them advance both professionally and personally. This webinar is particularly aimed at our alumni, and so to give a few words of welcome, I want to welcome our co-host here, the president of the CHCI Alumni Association, Jose Plaza.
Gracias, Marco. It's always great to be in company with you and CHCI staff, and I'm really excited for the session. Everyone knows the White House Fellows Program is an extremely competitive and prestigious program, and so I'm really excited for this partnership that CHCI has brought about to not only let folks know about the opportunity to join this program, but to have folks like Margarita, Nelson, and David join us to share about the experience, the opportunity, and to really continue the mission of the CHCI Alumni Association and CHCI to continue building on the leadership of CHCI alums. I'm really excited for the opportunity that this fellowship program can bring about for Latinos, and more so for CHCI alums. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from Margarita about the program, about some of the qualifications, and hearing about the ways that folks can get involved. So thank you, everyone. And obviously, thank you to our sponsor for continuing to support the mission of CHCI and the work that the Alumni Association does. So thank you, Marco, and welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you for your leadership. Our alumni network is a strong national network, growing all the time. We're more than 4,000 people. We want to engage with the alumni and with Jose at the helm leading the national leadership of the Alumni Association. We've got a lot of exciting activities on deck for you all. So look for more updates and information from Jose and from us at CHCI, and stay involved. Before I welcome our three guests, our panelists that we have, who are going to talk a little bit about that in the program are going to talk a little bit about the experience. They're all actually alumni of the White House Fellows Program. I neglected to mention I'm actually sort of wearing two hats. I should be transparent about the fact that earlier this year I had the great honor of actually being appointed by President Biden to the President's Commission on White House Fellows. So I actually, in addition to being part of the CHCI familia, have the great pleasure and privilege of being part of the panel of commissioners who will be selecting next year's fellows. So I'm doubly motivated to bring this content to you all and try to share the word, spread the word among our community to make sure that we get ample numbers of applicants from our community who deserve every bit to be alongside all of the other illustrious folks that you're going to see and hear about who are fellows in this program. So wanted to make sure to mention that. So I wanted to introduce the three alumni that we have with us tonight, who are going to share a little bit about them. First up, we have David Iglesias, who's the director of the Wheaton Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics, and who's also an alum of the class of 94-95 of White House Fellows. Along with him, we're going to have Margarita Colmenares, as Jose was alluding to. She's the Director of Outreach and Recruitment for the White House Fellows Foundation and Association. And she's an alum of the class of 1991 and 92. And then third, last but certainly not least, the illustrious Nelson Diaz, who is currently a senior attorney at Dilworth Paxton, and who's an alum of the class of 1977-1978. How are you all doing? Good evening, you all.
Good evening, Marco. Doing fine.
Great. So why don't you let me give each of you a chance to give just a couple of brief words of introduction. Then I'm going to share both a video and a quick overview of the program, and then we'll actually come back to the three of you to hear again some of your thoughts, reflections. I've got some questions for each of you to help sort of illustrate for folks about the program. But first, let me start with David and give you a chance to at least say hello to our audience.
Yeah, it is so good to be able to join you, and thank you for making this possible, Marco. Just very briefly, the fellowship year was a transformative year in my life. It changed everything. I was practicing law in New Mexico, which is where I was raised. And this 1 year absolutely turbocharged my career, gave me a hunger to serve the public at the highest levels. And I was able to do so with a presidential appointment later. And I'm using the skills right now that I learned in the military and the White House Fellows as I teach Wheaton College students. So it's just been a wonderful ride so far.
Fantastic. Thanks. Fantastic. Thank you, David. Margarita, let's go to you.
Sure. So I'm in Sacramento, California. I'm on the West Coast, as I was when I applied to the White House Fellows, except I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And I have an engineering background, and I was working in a very large environmental cleanup project at the time. But I was also leading a nonprofit called the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. And some will describe the White House Fellowship as a front row seat to history, which it was for me. And what I mean by that is the year that I served at the US Department of Education was the year that Rodney King happened. And because I was placed, my principal, David Kearns, was named co-chair of the economic recovery efforts for Los Angeles. And so that became my portfolio, if you will. So
Wow,
I ended up working, not only was I from LA at that time, but I went back to work in LA for the economic recovery on behalf of the federal efforts. So
fantastic.
Again, like David said, transformative. You really don't know two fellowships are exactly alike, and you just really don't know what to expect.
That's great. That's great. And we're going to hear more about your experience and your takeaways in just a little bit. But let me give you over the mic to you, Judge Diaz, to say hello.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you for putting all of this effort together. I have had a lot of experience with the CCHI Fellows, and in fact, hired many of them when I was at HUD. And so they are incredibly the cream of the crop in the Latino community. And so I was the first Latino to pass the bar in Pennsylvania, and the first Latino to graduate from a law school at Temple. So I have an invested interest in seeing more Latinos participate in this program, because it's not enough in the last 54 years. And that's why I'm doing whatever I can to do whatever can do to help you, Marcus, select the right people.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So let's start explaining a little more about what the program actually is. For folks who've heard of it, who've been curious, let us give you just a quick overview. So first of all, you should know it's described as the nation's premier nonpartisan leadership and service opportunity. There have been more than 800 White House Fellows who've served 10 presidential administrations over 55 years. So the program has been around for quite a while. And its purpose, its vision, its goal was to foster and strengthen future leaders for the betterment of our communities and nation. It literally seeks to find really promising, talented individuals from all walks of life throughout the country and to bring them to Washington, D.C. to work in the White House and throughout the presidential administration to learn all sorts of different aspects and to share them, their talents with the nation. The purpose of tonight, if it's not obvious, is to share information with you all about the program, you all who are leaders in all sorts of fields and all sorts of regions, and in fact, to encourage you to both consider applying yourselves, but also to spread the word in our community, to let more folks know about this incredible program and encourage them also to apply, to make sure that we have great representation, as it should be, in this program, just like we're well represented throughout the population in the United States. So there is actually a video that has been created that provides just a quick overview. It's about 3.5 minutes long. So we're going to roll that video now, and you'll hear from the folks directly involved with the program itself, really what it's all about, and then we'll come back to the panel.
What we're trying to do is to find here in this country, yes, here in the White House Fellow, a combination of an idealist with vision and a pragmatist with judgment.
this program. It goes back for 55 years and stretches across all departments of government and presidencies and administrations. And it's an incredible program, and I hope everyone listening will encourage others to apply, to learn more about this. It's something that everyone should know about, even though they may not be a fellow themselves. It's a rich part of the White House tradition, and we're very grateful to President Johnson and those around him for establishing this program.
Founded in 1964, this prestigious program puts the best and brightest physicians, military officers, academics, business leaders, and others to work in the highest levels of government. With direct access to the White House, cabinet secretaries, and world leaders. Many of its alumni have gone on to greater achievement. Colin Powell, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, Senator Sam Brownback, Paul Gigot of the Wall Street Journal, to name just a few.
I learned most of all how you champion good causes and how you stand up and fight causes that are not good, how you take risks for doing that which is right. And so for me, it was a very formative experience, one that I've treasured ever since.
Year after year, I've enjoyed working with the White House Fellows. Each and every one brings a variety of talents and energy into the government, and in many ways represents my best hopes for our future.
What kind of person do I think should apply for the program? I think would be someone who is committed to servant leadership, just as John Gardner would have said, someone who is ready to give back.
We expect a lot out of you. We expect you to go back to your units or your businesses or your universities or perhaps government agencies and lead, to set high standards, to set a good example, and to serve something greater than yourself. That's what the Fellows Program is all about.
I had this amazing fellowship year. I worked for the First Lady, Hillary Clinton at the time. I think what was interesting is in the beginning of the fellowship, you're sort of trying to find your way and you do everything. And then all of a sudden, by the midpoint of the year, someone comes up to you one day and says, "We have a speech for the First Lady tomorrow. Do you want to write it?" It's just these sudden baptisms throughout the year that are wonderful. You feel like you're absolutely not prepared. You can't do it in some ways, and then all of a sudden, you're doing it. And when a year goes by, you can't believe it's over. I think in many ways, the year as a White House Fellow has shaped the rest of my life.
Whoopsie. There we go. Wow. So as you all can see, it's a pretty incredible program. And let's share a little bit more. And hopefully this shows you, inspires you, motivates you, and doesn't scare you off from applying, because realize all of these folks who are incredible leaders that just talked, especially among the alumni, and as you'll hear from alumni on the panel tonight, they weren't all already nationally, if not globally famous people when they were fellows, right? So stay with us and hear more about ways in which you can get involved. As you heard in the video, it was established by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964, and the idea was to give firsthand high-level experience in the workings of government. The idea was that a genuinely free society cannot be a spectator society, right? Freedom isn't free, is what we say, I think, a lot of times these days. In its deepest sense, freedom requires participation. I think that was the quote that folks used in creating the program. And it was created by John Gardner. If you're not familiar with John Gardner, he is a giant in the leadership development space. He was an incredible person, public servant who served in government, and who also really believed deeply in leadership, in public service being one of the highest forms of leadership. And so he really helped create and form the foundation for this organization that would select the ablest and most highly motivated young men and women in the nation for a period of service with the government. The idea was spend a year in government, see how it is, and whether you continue in government or not, you'll be able to carry all of that you've learned forward, and again, you'll have made your contribution to bettering society. The criteria were simply intelligence, character, special talents, and general promise. Pretty general criteria. As you'll hear in a minute, they've evolved a little bit with a little more clarity. But the idea, again, was just people who were hardworking, who were smart, who were conscientious, who were upstanding individuals, again, and who wanted to contribute. The quote he said was that the standards would be so high that this would be as impressive an honor as a young person could win. So this truly is the idea of one of the kinds of pinnacles of your career, is trying to aspire to and achieve this. And there are a great many people who are not just alumni, but have been applied for the program, and as you'll hear from our alumni, who've benefited even from the process of applying. So a little bit about the fellows. So who are the kinds of folks that they look for, right? People who have a record of remarkable achievement earlier in their career, right? So if you've managed to accomplish anything, and once again, we're thinking expansively here. You don't necessarily have to have created a Fortune 500 company. You don't necessarily have to have secured a patent. You don't necessarily have to have won international renown, right? Or spoken at the United Nations. You simply have to have made achievements in your career in some way that you can speak to, that you're proud of, that you've actually demonstrated that you've had an impact in some way, shape, or form. And again, particularly our CHCI alumni family, although I know many folks are beyond that maybe watching, our folks in our community, folks who've gone through our program, are exactly those kinds of people who aspire to and in fact do make incredible achievements pretty early on in their lives. They're also looking for folks who have evidence of leadership skills and potential for growth, pretty self-explanatory. A commitment to public service, right? The idea of why do you want to serve in the White House Fellowship? As a White House Fellow, it's because you want to serve your society, the greater good. You have the skills to succeed at the highest levels of government. Folks work directly with White House staff, with cabinet secretaries, with sub-cabinet secretaries, sub-cabinet officials at the highest levels. We're thinking at the most macro and strategic level. And so it's the ability to be able to work with those folks and to engage and to support them. They do have to be US citizens. Unfortunately, this is a program that employs individuals by the federal government, as you all know. The CHCI Fellowship is one of the few, and the internship is one of the few ways in which folks who are not US citizens can serve in a public capacity, thankfully, serving on Capitol Hill, working with members of Congress. But for this program, yes, it is at the moment still limited to US citizens. Folks have to have completed an undergraduate education, and current federal government employees are not eligible unless they're career military. So unfortunately, if you are currently working on Capitol Hill, you're not eligible, but this is definitely something to think about when you decide to step away from your federal career and look for your next chapter in life. As was mentioned, the folks who oversee the program on the one hand are the President's Commission on White House Fellowships, but we are not full-time employees. There is a commission director. It's worth noting that the commission director this year, also named earlier this year by President Biden, is none other than Rose Vela. So a member of our community, I think possibly for the first time, I'm not sure, but certainly a person from our community who understands our community is actually at the helm of the commission and leads and works with all of the fellows and leads the staff that work with them. A class is 11 to 19 fellows of varied backgrounds and professions. The 11 to 19, the commission gets latitude and discretion in choosing from the applicant pool to select the number. This year, in fact, we chose the maximum number possible, 19. So there are 19 fellows currently serving. And what do the fellows do? As I mentioned, they work in the White House, they work in cabinet agencies, and they participate in an education program. So not unlike the CHCI program, they work full-time as employees, but they have supplemental workshops, briefings, presentations. They actually meet with guest speakers. They actually do a trip or two during the year. So there's stuff that supplements their work full-time in serving the principals that they work with. The time frame is September through August, so it's a little less than a year, also not unlike the CHCI Fellowship. And always a question, is it political? No, the fellowship is nonpartisan. Folks are encouraged to apply, folks are selected irrespective of who is in the White House at the time. We're looking for a well-rounded class of public servants Again, regardless of which political party happens to be occupying the White House at any particular time, this idea is about folks who want to serve the greater good, serve the public, and move forward. So it's not to say that based on the political affiliation in office, that only folks from that political affiliation can apply to the program. And yes, fellows are paid. Fellows are paid a salary comparable to a senior executive, actually, in the federal government for that time. The application window for the class of 22-23 applications open November 1st, and they're available. The deadline is till January 7th, which is why we wanted to do this webinar as soon as we could, to give you all a chance to review, to apply, to share the word, as we said. There is a process where regional finalists are selected from the applicant pool in February and March. There are some panels that will be conducted. I don't know if we've decided yet if they're going to be virtual. They were virtual, of course, in 2021. We're not sure if they're going to be virtual again next year. They may be in person. Obviously, they used to be in person in regions throughout the country. I think they're aiming to be able to do them in person again, obviously, but circumstances will dictate. And then there's a final selection weekend in June, early June. I believe it's the first weekend of June, where the finalists come together, or again, as we did last year, were virtual, where all the finalists come together with all of the commissioners, and there's sort of a rapid fire round of interviews with the finalists, which helps then the commission select the class of fellows at the end of that program. The placement weeks is in July, where fellows, I think, travel to DC, but they meet and interact with cabinet agencies and so on. They sort of do a kind of interviews, I think. The alumni will correct me if I'm wrong on that process. I'm new to it. But that's what happens. And then fellows, again, begin arriving in August to get started and to jump right in and do their work. I should mention, as one of the things I'm realizing as I walk through all of this with you as a commissioner, we also on occasion have had, for webinars like this, had the actual staff from the commissions present at this webinar and be available to answer questions. Unfortunately, they're actually doing programming with the current class of fellows as we speak right now tonight, and so they weren't able to join us for this webinar. But as you'll see, we'll have contact info up in just a little bit, and we'll certainly be happy to direct you all to not only the website, which provides a lot more detail and information should you have questions, but also even to the staff if necessary. They're happy to follow up and help answer questions and provide information as needed, both to you or anyone else you know. All right, so that was a quick rapid fire run through the program, at least to give you basic general sense of what the program is all about. But let's hear directly from the alumni now. Let's hear from the fellows. So if we can bring back our illustrious panel of David, Margarita, and Nelson, we can get into the conversation. Hey, you all. And certainly, obviously, when you jump in and chat, you can all correct me if I'm wrong. But let me start with a question for each of you, which is, tell us a little bit about your story, right? Tell us about what led you to become a White House Fellow. What is the work you were doing before when you applied? What is it that inspired you to try to apply, and those kinds of things? Shall we start with you, Judge Diaz?
Oh, I'd be happy to. I was an economic developer, lawyer just coming out of law school. I have been involved in a lot of advocacy. There was murder cases that I have freed individuals who were wrongly accused. And I had started the development of programs within the Latino community since there were very few professionals. And I founded the Black Law Student Association, and I founded the Latino Law School Association. I had the opportunity then to apply because I was really motivated by Henry Cisneros' activity, Henry Cisneros' participation. I applied, and I was, at 30 years old, I was able to get into the vice president's office, which made myself a great opportunity to advocate even more for our community. I met Federico Peña there. He was working for Chicanos por la Causa. We worked on bilingual education and got a bilingual education bill through. I was working also with the political side, Governor Rick Hernandez, and we went to see the vice president and asked the vice president to establish a Latino office in the White House. Esteban Torres was our first Latino to be in the White House working on Latino issues. And ever since then, we've had a Latino to work on Latino issues. So you can make major contributions. And that put me in touch with the entire national Latino community, was where I met you working with La Raza. And so you have been a real observant of history and how the program can really amplify one's opportunities to contribute back to your own community.
Fantastic. Thank you. Margarita, let's go to you. Tell us a little bit about the path that got you over to the White House. Oh, you're muted. Always the classic mute.
Okay,
There
there
you
we
go.
All right, so I was 34 when I found out about the fellowship, and I would not have found out if it hadn't been for two gentlemen. Now, you have to know that I grew up a Democrat. My family was always the first one in our neighborhood to have a yard sign, very politically active. So the two gentlemen that approached me were both Republicans. And I remember thinking, first thought that crossed my mind was, why would I want to work for a Republican administration? Because this was at the end of the Bush senior administration. And so I initially said, no, I'm not interested. And those two persons, to the true nonpartisan nature of the program, they insisted. And one of them even sent away for the application and handed it to me. And at that point, when I was looking through the brochure, I too was inspired by Henry Cisneros, Colin Powell, and others, who had served. And I decided, actually, yes, I do want to do this. And so I completely changed my mindset about it. And I applied. As I said, I was living in Los Angeles. I was heading up a nonprofit at the time. I was the first female elected to lead that group, which is probably why I came to the attention of these other gentlemen. And it was literally a tap on the shoulder. And so when I applied, it was with intent. And I'm glad that I did, because a year later, well, let me backtrack. After I became a fellow, after I served my year, I went back to the private sector, and I was then back doing corporate work. And Clinton got elected, and I was invited to go back to serve again as a political appointee, but this time, and again at the U.S. Department of Education, but now I was with a Democrat administration. So I was at the same building, same table, conference room where decisions were being made, but the agendas were completely different. So it was very insightful for me to really realize that adage that you hear all the time, it really makes a difference who gets elected, because that person in turn brings in the agenda that they want to accomplish during their term. So it was an eye-opening experience for me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Margarita. And David, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I first heard about the fellowship program as an active duty U.S. Navy JAG officer in my 20s. I had heard that it was the preeminent program for leadership and public service. So I ordered, this is back in the old days, so I actually got them in the U.S. mail. I got the directory of that class. I looked at their bios. I saw all these, incredible high achievers, and I thought, there's no way. So I literally threw away the application. I served out my first tour as a Navy JAG. I went home to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was a state prosecutor. And then I went to the hardest working job I've ever done, which was defending police officers in misconduct cases. So Margarita knows that when Rodney King, when his video went viral, it caused all kinds of collateral issues, including federal court cases against police officers. So I was trying cases all the time and getting really good results. So my boss called me into his office and he said, David, you need to think about the fellows program. And I thought, well, maybe I'm ready now. I was 35 years old. I had tried a lot of cases, both in military court and federal court and state court. I was comfortable on my feet. And I thought, I can convince strangers that I'm probably right. So these are helpful skills in the fellow selection process, because it's an amazingly intense process. So I applied and lightning struck. I actually got selected my first time, which I've heard anecdotally, a lot of fellows get picked up on their second or third time. But that one experience was, like I said earlier, transformative. I went from having a very small horizon career in New Mexico to having this global options, national options. And it's the most significant thing I've done professionally since graduating law school many years ago.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention earlier, but in case it's not obvious to folks who are viewing, we will have Q&A. We will be able to allow you all to ask questions of our panel And between them and me, we'll do our best to try and answer any questions you all might have. So if you want to start typing those into the either the Q&A box or into the chat, we'll keep an eye on those and we'll try to incorporate those. But as folks are preparing those, let me circle back to the panel and ask again, and ask another question. So thinking about not just yourselves, but the fellows who served in your cohort, the fellows you've gotten to know over the years, because I know the Alumni Association is very active and very well connected with each other. We heard about the criteria, right? I've laid out the bullets on the slide deck, but I'm wondering, do you all discern any kind of pattern? Are there any kind of common elements? Is there a profile or a set of either skills or experiences, even with the breadth and diversity I know of that makes up the White House Fellowship cohort? What are the kinds of things that make someone a good White House Fellow candidate? What would you all say are the kinds of things people should be thinking about themselves in order to consider applying? And anybody can jump in who wants to hazard a response. Go ahead, David. Sure.
So in my class, high achievers, limitless potential, and humble people. I mean, normal humility doesn't go with high achievement, but everyone in my class was incredibly smart, incredibly gifted in leadership in their professions, but also humble. I mean, they could talk baseball, they could talk about anything. And you just genuinely liked them, and they were in the program for the right reasons, which was to learn leadership, to serve the public.
That's awesome.
For me, my class, it was important for me to learn about the military fellows. And so to have people who had served in Vietnam and who had experiences and to essentially correlate with what was happening there with what we were was really an eye-opener, because there was a lot of turmoil back home over the war. And so, you appreciated the commitment that they had, and you appreciated these people. In addition to that, we had opportunities to be in Panama for the Panama Canal and work on the Panama Canal treaties. We had opportunities to go into the Bronx when the Bronx was a vacant lot where every president came to say, hey, we're going to resurrect this area. And we essentially had an opportunity to work and talk to those folks and come back and try to develop an urban kind of strategy together to talk about, what we thought was necessary and how we could essentially influence a project. We never knew if we influenced it at all, but we sort of looked at it and gave our opinions. And we met with great people from throughout the world and throughout the country, from press individuals to ambassadors to whatever you can fathom. We had met with at lunch and had off the record discussions, which were extremely enlightening to our education.
Great.
So-
That's great. Anything to add, Margarita? Yeah.
Yeah, so what I would add, so I actually have been able to speak to a lot of alumni because of the position I hold within the organization. And I would say, if there's a couple of words that probably describe the group as a body, the first words that come to my mind are servant leaders, because these are truly people who decided to step away from whatever it was they were doing to go and into government to learn at the highest levels, how does government affect us every day? And you actually do get to see that and learn that and maybe even be part of that process, whether it's setting policy, inputting your ideas, which may be different from everyone else in the room. So you have to be willing to speak up, obviously. David said it in his comments, about being humble, but good on your feet, I think is the words he used. And so that is very true. You can't be shy, but also you have to know how to modulate political antenna, when to be low key, when to go in strong. So these are all things I think that, as it's been described to me by some fellows, something I never would have learned in grad school. There's just nothing like it in the world that compares to actually having served a year as a White House Fellow. It's also been described as drinking from a fire hose. So that's how much is thrown at you, and you have to be able to kind of sift through what's important and run with what you think are your strongest skills and where you think you can contribute the most.
Thank you for that. And I think one of the things that I think I heard across the three of you that's worth noting is that folks should realize that it certainly sounds like you don't, none of the fellows ever sort of sit on the sidelines and watch, right? This is not an opportunity. This is not an experience where you just get to be a fly on the wall and you're just learning. You get thrown into the deep end and you get tasked with real work, right? You get given real assignments quickly, right? I think it was Sanjay Gupta on the video, right, who said he was asked to write a speech for the First Lady, probably just a couple of months into the fellowship, right? And so it's worth noting again that this is not for someone who's expecting to or hoping to go slow, right? This is something that has a pretty fast pace. Now, you all have talked about this incredible experience. It clearly is an amazing accomplishment. I'm sure folks are really excited and hopefully envisioning themselves in the role, but you got to get there first. You got to get chosen to be a fellow. So let's talk about the application process. What do you all think people should know about it? We've talked a little bit about it, but I don't know if you want to share reflections on your experience applying, or just again, highlights things that you think people should keep in mind, or ways that they can prepare to be strong candidates when they get through submitting the paper application and the essays, doing the interviews, the rounds, answering questions, all those kinds of things. Anybody want to jump in first?
Sure. I'll take a plunge. So I knew the caliber of the competition. I knew there'd be Rhodes Scholars and, Truman Scholars and Fulbrights in my cohort. So I knew my application had to be perfect. So I did about 50 drafts, spent a full month going in on weekends and after work, and made sure that everything was right. Then I ran it by my English and Spanish teacher mother to make sure it was perfect. No grammatical errors. Then I made sure that the 500-word, essays were no more than 499 words. I counted them. So I just spent a lot of time, and then I did. I lent my application to a couple of former fellows, and I said, "Would you please look at this and tell me, is this in the ballpark?" And then they both said that it was. But I think probably the single most important thing that I did was I watched a show that used to be on TV called The McLaughlin Group. It was on NBC, and there was a bunch of talking heads that would talk about the breaking issues of the day. So I knew what was going on politically in this country in a way that I'd never really drilled down that deep. So by the time I went to regionals, I thought I was more or less ready for that. And I'm really glad that I did, because it turns out at finals, we had 33 or so in my class, and 3 were Rhodes Scholars and only 1 got picked.
Wow. Yeah. With me, I applied thinking I would never get in. But the important thing that I did is what I put in the application was something that I knew was personal, wasn't theoretical. And when I was asked questions about it, I could essentially bring back up, how do you do this economic neighborhood development? How you touch the little stores, and how do you develop that? Because you want to be able to respond in a very comfortable way. And they know that if you took this from something else, or from some book or some ideological background, that it's not yours and it's not your work product. So it's got to be essentially your work product, which you have to emphasize in terms of that. I didn't think I was going to get in. I went through the process, and through the grace of God, I thank John Gardner, who was then the chairman of the commission, to have selected me. And because most of the candidates before me happened to be mostly white males, I didn't think that I had a chance in the world. But I did the process, and I had nothing to lose. And fortunately, I was able to serve the country well, and I've been able to continue to be of service throughout my life.
So awesome. Nelson's point about authenticity is really key. You have to be yourself, and that's probably the advice most often given. If you connect with an alumni, they will say to you, "Be yourself," and it's for the same reasons that Nelson just articulated. When I applied, I'm glad I didn't look at the statistics of how many people had advanced degrees, because I might not have applied. I come from a community college background. I transferred to Stanford. I finished with an engineering degree, but I did not have an advanced degree at the time that I applied. What I did have, though, how did I make up for it? PhD in life, right? I was already leading the nonprofit. I had given maybe 50 speeches by that time nationwide. on college campuses. So I was very comfortable on my feet, you know, like David had said earlier. I was used to getting questions hurled at me, you know, from fourth graders to moms, you know, wondering, how can I get my daughter interested in engineering? So, you know, just I was very comfortable in those type of settings, which is part of what this application process is. There is first the paper cut, you know, where your story has to stand out. You know, alumni will sit and read through all the applications that come in, and you will get a rating. And then based on those ratings is how they determine what we call the first cut and the group that's then going to go to regionals. From then on, it is in person. So anything you wrote on paper, you better darn sure better know, you know, what you said and what you meant. And at the same time, be able to answer those questions that David Iglesias talked about, which are about whether they're local, regional, or global affairs. And there is no question off limits, I should add. And every year too, depending on the commission, you know, the questions could be different. And it's not so much like what you say in your answer, but how you say it is another thing that I've kind of discerned about this.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you each. And remember, folks, you can submit a question if you have any questions. If there's anything we haven't covered, obviously we're trying to be thorough, so maybe that's why. But we haven't seen any questions, so please do feel free to weigh in and ask the panelists anything you want to know. Again, as people are typing in, let me ask you each: what was either one thing that was very surprising about either the application process or the experience, or what might come to mind for you also, what would you consider to have been the hardest part, again, of either the application process or of the experience of the year you were a fellow?
Yeah,
something
so
that
Mark,
was surprising, unexpected, or something that was you would consider to be the hardest part of it? Yep.
I think the hardest part for me, Marco, was during placement week. You've got this wealth of opportunities. And in my case, I had opportunities at the CIA, at the Labor Department, at the Justice Department, at the Transportation Department. I'm probably forgetting some. And I mean, it's like, do you pick the BMW, the Lexus, or the Tesla? You know, I mean, I don't know. So I just went with, I want to work for the top person. And it turned out I went with transportation because Federico Pena was my boss. And relative to a comment you made earlier, I wrote a speech for him. I traveled with him. I went to a commencement address with him. I worked with his chief of staff. He gave me the portfolio of consumer protection for transportation. And I didn't know much about that. So, you know, like Margarita said, you have to be flexible and you've got to be able to pivot rather quickly. So this program is not for the faint of heart. I mean, you've got to be flexible and you're going to make some mistakes, but this program really changes your life. And I don't know how much more I can say that clearly.
I was assigned to the vice president's office, and I was somewhat awed by the assignment and the fact that I'm sitting in the White House with Fritz Mondale. It took me a while to realize that this was really happening to me, and I didn't know how to react to the whole process. But he was so willing to give me enough rope to hang myself, let me make mistakes, and like everybody else, they wrote speeches for their principals. But I was somewhat coming from an advocacy situation out of Philadelphia. You know, I was an activist, and I was pushing the civil rights movement. And he was, to some extent, a very passive activist himself. And all of the issues that I sort of cared about, he cared about. So he gave me enough rope to be able to help do the process and be involved and engaged, and took me to a lot of his trips. One trip was very, very, and I talk about it, very important to me because it showed me the loyalty of the man to the president in terms of decision making, and realize how important loyalty is. Another trip, he opened my eyes to the world when he took me to Chapultepec, and I saw that people had lived there 5,000 years or before. And I said, what am I concerned about in Philadelphia? 5,000 years ago, there were Latinos down here in Mexico, Indians pretty much. And I'm thinking, I'm worried about what's happening in Philadelphia. The world is bigger than Philadelphia. And he opened that world up to me, and it's never closed. And those are the things that I think are unbelievably not quantifiable in the process of having this opportunity for you. And then you've developed a friendship for the rest of your life. Your Mondale became a friend, and I saw him until the year before he died. So those relationships will continue for a very, very long time.
That's great. Thank you. Margarita, how
So
would you
let me
answer
add
that
this.
question?
So when I applied, I didn't know any alumni. I didn't know that was a thing, that you could actually connect with an alumni. But anyways, so I put together my application and I reached out to my 5 best women friends, mis comadres, and I had them look it over. And invariably they came back and said, well, what about this? Because the different things that they knew I had been done. What about that? So they helped me round out a good picture, you know, round picture of other things that I had done. And then I took the next step of when I found out that one of the phases was going to be interviews, like regional interviews with the board, with the panel. They became my panel, which I found out later are called murder boards. So, you know, I kind of went through those steps, but then when I finally made it to finals, back in those days, they used to publish a list of names of who had made it to finals. And guess what? Guess who was the first person that called me on the phone? It was Nelson Diaz. And he said to me, hey, Margarita, congratulations, you know, you made it to the finals. And they offered insight, you know, those alumni into what to expect during that last level, you know, what that was going to be like going into finals. So I would say, you know, what was surprising to me was I didn't know you could talk to an alumni as part of the process and getting ready. And you should prepare yourself. You know, you should practice what you think you might be asked. Think of the craziest questions you can imagine. Have your friends, you know, whoever, your colleagues, whoever's willing to help you prepare. But I will tell you, when I showed up the fellowship, I didn't feel like I was alone, like it was just Margarita Colmenares interviewing. I felt like it was me and all my colleagues, you know, all of them were there with me in the room, putting my best foot forward, but I couldn't have done it without their help. So it was not a singular effort.
Awesome. Thank you. And so, of course, now I'll be careful what you wish for, because now we have several questions and now we're running short on time, but I want to try to get to them because they're really great questions. So I want to ask a couple really quick, if we can try to get some quick answers to try and give folks the info they're seeking. So one question I will summarize, but basically alludes to the fact that certainly the current class of fellows and there's probably a potential inference that to be selected for a fellow, you have to have gone to a prestigious college. The educational background seems to be fairly highly competitive. So I'm wondering if you all could shed any insight on your experience, and Margarita, maybe you certainly who engage with the alumni consistently, like have all the fellows always only come from the top tier schools, the top 20 colleges in America, or is there a breadth, and is there room for someone who hasn't necessarily gone there, but who has accomplished in other ways to be a strong candidate?
Absolutely. You know, yes, historically, you know, there's a top 3 institutions, right, where fellows come from, but that is not always the case. And we are, with our outreach effort, really trying to go out into the middle of the country. Excuse me. Remember, I said I came from a community college. There's maybe a handful of us within the fellow alumniship who have come through that route. It is possible, you know, and I can't think of a humbler school than a community college, right? Than even any 4-year college. So the fact that someone with my background, another person that shares that background is Congresswoman Sharice Davids, who went to a community college in Kansas before she ended up at Cornell Law School. So, you know, sometimes it's a combination, right, of these different educational experiences that we have. But just know that we want people from all walks of life. We want the best people who are really excellent at what they're doing, who really care about the community, and who have demonstrated leadership, both in their chosen field as well as in the community.
Yeah, and I can add, I'm just realizing, because I'm a commissioner, we as a group of commissioners are committed also to ensuring that we really consider expansively what makes a strong candidate. And one of the things I have noticed as a pattern is, for example, and I'm going to pick on them because they're my rival college. I have to confess, did go to a prestigious college. But it seemed to me, though, that students who went to Harvard were essentially handed the application or the website at some point, because there are a lot of folks from Harvard who apply for this program, but as a result, then they get highly represented in the class by sheer numbers, right? And so that's one of the things about a webinar like this, is that there are not enough applications from folks who essentially take themselves out of the running because they decide that they're not even going to apply because they didn't go to one of those schools. And let me tell you for sure, I know myself and many of the commissioners I've spoken to, for us, that's not a criteria of sort of saying what's the name of the school they went to. For us, we want to see and hear what they've done, what their lived experience. To me, it's often much more important. The journey and any hardships that have been overcome sort of show much more grit and resolve and innovation and creativity than simply someone who may have in fact been helped all along the way to go to that prestigious school and actually didn't have to work hard to get there. So definitely would encourage that. And I think you heard Margarita, and I'm sure Nelson and David would agree. Margarita, for you, it was a specific question, but if any other folks want to weigh in on this, there is some, especially in these days, I'm sure, there is some wariness about whether in fact the program is nonpartisan. Again, I can say as a commissioner, I know for our selection process, that was not a factor. We specifically did not look for that or ask any questions or related to that and so on. But again, because you've seen the program over the years, do you think there's been any shift? Has it become any less nonpartisan, any more impacted and influenced by politics, given that we're in such a political time?
You know, I would like to think that it's not, but it is ultimately the commissioners who decide who gets into the final class. I do think that there is a lot of equity that goes on before that. You know, when the alumni are going through the applications, they don't know if you're a Democrat or Republican, unless you care to reveal that, you know, somehow that I was part of this party or the other. They're looking at just your qualifications. So for a good part of this, you know, you make it through based on your qualifications and what you wrote, you know, how you presented yourself on paper, so to speak. So Marco, you would have more insight into that question than I would, but, you know, my feeling is, you know, we're all humans, right? As far as commissioners are concerned. And I've never been a commissioner at the national level, so I can't really say. Actually, Nelson has. Maybe he can speak to this as well.
I served on the commission for 8 years, and I served for another 6 years on the regional commission. And even though it's nonpartisan, non-political, there is a bent with regard to conservative liberals and that kind of situation in terms of some of the commissioners and how the commissioners may ask questions and try to fool you into getting into a ditch so that they can disqualify you. But the process really right now is really open to us. There's an opportunity for Latinos, I think, for the first time in a very, very long time. Why? Because we have the first Latina director. We've got you on the commission. We've got other Latinos on the commission. And that has been a very difficult task. We haven't had as many Latino commissioners, either regional or locally, involved in this process. And as a result, there is a different category that they look at. For example, when I went through the process, one African-American Republican said that I was too ethnic. Well, you know, if you were only involved in Jewish activities, you were too Jewish into it. So I was basically involved in a lot of Latino activities. And so you've got people who essentially have their own biases and not a political bias, have their own biases, which create a real problem sometimes for some of our applicants.
Thank you, Nelson. And I can speak as Margarita alluded to. I mean, certainly the current class of commissioners were a diverse group as well. It's not all exclusively Democrats. And we, again, have committed ourselves to really trying to identify and pull in a class and select a class that is diverse in all ways, including worldview, perspective, opinion, and so on, right? We're not going to necessarily say we're going to try to do something 50-50, but we're not trying to completely stack the deck in one way only, and to make this a particularly political thing. And in fact, to the other question that asked about if you've been involved in local politics, I mean, I think saying you've been involved civically is helpful. I think in some ways it's useful, much like with any job application, right? Because in some ways applying to this program is essentially applying to a job. keeping things more general and talking about the accomplishments and the kinds of things you've done might be more helpful necessarily than political affiliation, because as everybody just said, even if we try to be balanced and fair and objective, again, everyone is still human and has their own conscious and unconscious biases and opinions and perspectives. And so again, I think keeping it general will be helpful. All right, we're almost out of time, and I know we have a couple of things I wanted a couple more pieces of information we want to share with you all, because again, this should not and hopefully won't be the only time and the only way you can get information about this program. So if we can pull up the slides really quick, I just want to share a couple final pieces of information and some resources, again, to help you all, both for yourselves and to help spread the word. So first of all, we have a lovely slide there of the current class of fellows. You'll see it's a very diverse class, at least visibly. And that was something, again, that we took pride in, that, again, we did not specifically seek to sort of say to choose people based on, for example, racial ethnic identification, but simply the class resulted because we had a pretty diverse pool of applicants, which is why, one more reason why this is important. Serving, it's a great quote. We have another one, if we can go forward on the slide. I want to move quickly. Alumni, again, are all over the place recruiting. So reach out to alumni. If you ever meet alumni, connect with them. If you want to get in touch with alumni, I think you can reach out to folks. You can go to the website, and again, folks will connect you if you have questions, and I'm certainly happy to connect you to the alumni. These three folks, if they're willing, and even some of the other alumni I know. There are online resources. There is a website, WHFF.org. It is the Fellows Foundation and Association. It houses a lot of information about the program. As you see, it has FAQs about the program. It features different alumni and provides you a lot of useful information. So make sure to save and to copy down that website, WHFF.org. On the White House website itself as well, there's information about the fellowship program. I think that's where you go to actually apply. Where the application is available now, but it does provide some information, for example, about the current class of fellows and other questions, again, to help you with the application process. So there's another good one that another good website and a resource you all should hold on to. In case we didn't mention it, just some basics so that you know, the application consists of including your resume, which is a more extended version of the typical resume. It will list your education, your employment, and volunteer and civic activities. They ask you for 3 or 4 recommendations, and then you are asked to submit a couple of essays. I can tell you now, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't change. One is to sort of propose a kind of a policy solution that you would recommend to the president or to someone in the administration. What would that policy be, and how would you persuade folks that it's a policy that should be implemented? I think one is a personal essay about sort of why you want to serve and what you think, how you think the program will benefit you. It's those kinds of questions like that, not unlike the college application process. Again, help us spread the word. It's really important that we try to up the numbers of Latino applicants. That's one of the reasons why we tried. We thought, again, it's a natural audience, the CHCI network, but also, again, we want to make sure we have great representation among the applicants, because that's just going to increase the chances of us having a diverse pool that includes representation of Latinos, Latinas, and Latinx leaders. Once again, WHFF.org, and of course, recruit@WHFF.org is an email that you can send with any follow-up questions if you want any more information. If you want brochures, you can find them on the website, and again, you can reach out via email to get information from folks as well. And that's it. We're just about at time. I want to give our panelists the last a chance to any final words, any closing comments. And one of the important things, if I haven't already said it or clarified, if there's any other angle around around which you all would want to share why it's important to have more folks from our community applying to this program.
So I'll take the lead. So Colin Powell went to the City University of New York.
That's right.
He's our most famous grad, and he went to a non-elite school. So keep that in mind.
Great point.
Why do we want to increase representation? Because we're the largest ethnic minority in the country, and we're growing rapidly. So when you compare numbers, let's show our community's strength in this incredible leadership program. And I'll do everything I can. And I know Nelson and Margarita will as well. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, David.
Margarita, you want to go next?
Well, what I want to point out, first of all, Marco, is that our recruitment effort is totally alumni driven. It's volunteer. And these 2 gentlemen are actually the chairs of our outreach to the Latino effort. That's one thing. I want to invite people. I always get LinkedIn invites. Please send it my way. I'm always the first to post on any information regarding the White House Fellows because of my position as Director of Outreach and Engagement. So if you want to be in the loop, so to speak, link in and you'll see whatever news is breaking about the White House Fellows. So, I just want to encourage everyone who's watching this today to seriously consider applying. Take a look at the application. Maybe like David Iglesias, you may think I'm not quite ready, but on the other hand, you put it on your bucket list. It's there, it's in your mind, you know about it, and you'll know when you are absolutely ready to apply. You will know when you're able to, let's call it, sail through the interview processes, because that, again, I just want to emphasize, it's written as much as it is in person, except for the COVID years. So, but you get my
It was
drift.
video. Yeah.
There's
Close.
there's an oral component to this application process that's just as important as the written one, and the passion, not to forget that. So if you have the passion, write it down, let it show, and come and join us.
And lastly, there is a wonderful life after you serve. 3 years after I left, I was appointed judge by the governor, a Republican governor of the state of Pennsylvania, at 33 years old. So you can imagine what Colin Powell had the opportunity to do really came as a result of his program. That's where he met the Bushes. And so you got to understand that this will enhance not only your life, but the opportunities for many, many Latinos in this country. And you've got to labor it that way. You've got to work on it, because it's not only your life, but it's the opening of doors for a lot of people in our community.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nelson, Margarita, and David, for being with us tonight, for sharing your insights and your wisdom. But more importantly, thank you for your service, both to our community and to the nation, not just as fellows, but in your career, since you all are the examples I think I certainly want to follow, and I think a lot of our viewers do too. So we appreciate knowing that you're out there and having spent some time with you all. And to everybody watching, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for hearing about this program. Again, as everyone mentioned, we strongly urge you to consider applying, if not now, in the future. We strongly urge you to help spread the word with other folks about this program. Pass the word along to other folks. Tell them that it exists. Tell them that we are eligible and that we should be strong candidates for it. We should be applying to the program. And finally, lastly, as always, I want to thank Jose Plaza, our Alumni Association president, and I want to thank our sponsor, Bristol Myers Squibb, that makes webinars like this possible, so that we can bring content like this to you all that can help continue your journey as leaders, so that you can continue to make positive change and a real tangible impact in your communities, in the Latino population in the United States, and frankly, in the country, if not the world. We want to help assist you and equip you with the resources and supports and tools you need to make that impact, to have our community take its rightful place in making the world better and creating a brighter future. So with that, thanks everyone. We hope to see you all again soon in an upcoming webinar. In fact, we have one next week, so feel free to be sure to tune back in, and we'll see you soon. Have a good night.